נראה סבבה, השומר מסך.
Hello, everybody. I think it's just us. Asaf, can you hear me? You're on mute. And you thought you're on mute.
Yes, it's just us. I hope that people will come here. They are coming.
Should we send like a note right now just saying bye, take it easy? You could just hit the resend button and say friendly reminder, we start in 5 minutes.
Okay, I will do that.
I guess it can't hurt, So Asaf, you figured out how to get a bus in your background. Good for you.
Okay, can you hear me, Lance?
Perfectly.
Okay, excellent. So I'm set. That's great. Now, if people come, that will be a bonus.
Yes. We're still a couple minutes in advance.
Yeah,
And
I see. Here I see people.
I don't think we're going to start on the hour exactly, but Efot sent the 5 minute, 5 minute warning. Hi, everybody. Those of you who are on mute, you can unmute now, because we have a couple minutes to schmooze before the tour gets started.
Right.
So I see Norman. Is that Norman from Vancouver?
Norman from Vancouver, it is.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Is it sunny or rainy Vancouver today?
Pouring.
Pouring.
Oh.
Pouring. What else
Pouring.
is new, right?
We're expecting extreme hot temperature on Yom Kippur.
Oh.
And with the synagogues closed, that's an interesting day.
Yeah. So you're drinking now to dehydrate for Monday.
I want to remind everybody to drink before we get on the bus and use the bathrooms. No stops today.
Hey, Lawrence, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Beautiful flowers in the background.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that real or a virtual background?
It's a gift from our sister-in-law, who I think is joining us if she's not already on the phone. So Asaf, that's a great background, although it should be filled with virtual tourists.
I'm waiting. I have seats reserved.
Ah, great.
There's always the people who sit in the front seats, people who prefer the middle ones, not to be bothered too much. The people in the back who do all the fun stuff. Every bus has its dynamics.
That's for sure. I think when we toured with you, most of us were congregated in the middle. Sort of close enough that we could hear you, but
do your own
taking in the fun as well.
Yeah.
It was really a nice trip.
Yeah.
So Robin, your background is still quite beautiful. It's still green where you are.
Wow.
Sorry, I've been on Zoom all day with my students, so I'm just forgetting how to use it. Yeah, it's gorgeous outside.
Hey, Robin.
Outside. Hey, Laura. Just enjoying the weather while I can.
Yeah, Norman, you are really missing out on some beautiful weather here in Toronto.
Gorgeous. Crazy.
So did everybody have a happy new year? Before we get started, of course, we want to wish everybody all the best for a wonderful 5781.
Thank you. It was a different kind of New Year this year, for sure.
Did anybody do services via Zoom for the first time?
Yep. High holiday services for the first time.
Hi, Marcia. I see you're calling in from Winnipeg.
I'll forward it.
Nice to see you again. Now you're on mute.
So Lance, sorry, just a couple of people have called us to say they didn't get a copy of the link for today's tour.
Oh, okay. I'm not. Whoops. I'm not on mute now.
It's in the email, in the end of the email. But anyway, tell them to call me or to send me an email, and I will forward it.
Yeah, and Lawrence, I'll email you the link again right now, so you can just hit the forward button, through your phone to whoever's called you. You can send it to text, however you want to send it. So I'll do that as we speak.
Yeah, so I have the link, and I'm going to
just hit the forward button.
Yeah, I'll forward it. I just want to make sure that they get, I guess, accepted.
Yep.
I got it.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
Okay. So should we schmooze some more, or should we get the tour started?
I think we should wait. It's 5:02. I think we should wait like another minute or two. People are still, coming out of the hotel, using the washroom, whatever it is. So let's, before they board the bus, we'll give them an extra minute.
This is Israel time.
Right.
That's right. You look very chipper for midnight, Asaf.
I have no idea how this happened. I didn't sleep last night. I had two kids in my bed.
Oh no.
But I don't know. I'm excited for this. It's an interesting day.
What is your plan for Yom Kippur?
So we actually, for Rosh Hashanah, we planned on going to my parents, but we ended up not going because of the lockdown. Some people went, some didn't, but they're saying they're going to make it more strict. And Yom Kippur, I found a nice place that they're praying in this guy's house. He has a huge backyard and part in the street. He put gazebos in the street, put lots of fans. On Rosh Hashanah, there were bottles, like small personal bottles for people, and masks and gel.
Wow.
And he did all the laning, and they kept distance and everything. honestly, with the kids, it was easier than going to a real synagogue. They could play outside in the street. Yom Kippur is a very different day because say 80% of Jews in Israel, 70, 80% say that they fast on Yom Kippur or observe it in a certain way. So it's much more than any holiday. Like the streets are empty, 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 empty. And people actually go to synagogue on a regular year.
Hello,
So this
Shana
is
Tova.
Shalom, Shana Tova. So this is the big debate this year. They're now talking about it every hour. They're changing whether it will be open because there's still demonstrations going on. And they're allowing demonstrations, not allowing prayers. Are they going to cancel both? That's the big debate going on. I guess I'll be staying home within air conditioning, praying. There's on every corner. There's people gathering together and praying. Basically, I just want to find a nice corner. That's the goal. Very different this year.
Yeah, for all of us. For all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should, a couple minutes after 5, I think we should get started. Hi, Debbie.
Hi,
So,
how are you?
Great to see you. Happy New Year. So Lawrence and Debbie, why don't you kick things off?
Sure. So,
Hello, Lance. It's Gail here.
Hi, Gail. So we're gonna let Lawrence, Happy New Year. We're gonna let Lawrence and Debbie kick things off. Then we're gonna put everybody on mute while Asaf gets things started, and then we'll take breaks when we'll unmute and we can ask our questions. So Lawrence and Debbie, take it away.
sure.
Shana Tova.
Yeah, Shana Tova. So Happy New Year to everyone. I want to wish all of you and your families a Shana Tova, a sweet, healthy, and happy New Year. Thank you very much for joining us for the second and final day of our virtual tour. Today we will cover some of Israel's history through its wars, and then we will visit 3 of Israel's borders: the northern border with Lebanon, the southwestern border with Gaza, and the Green Line, the eastern border with the Palestinian Authority. To make the tour as efficient as possible, unfortunately, we will be on mute during the touring, but Asaf will stop every so often to ask for questions and comments. So please feel free to reserve your questions for that period. And if you're unable to ask a question, please feel free to use the chat button, and you can text Asaf, and he can include an answer to your question during his presentation. At the close of the tour, we'll have some additional time for questions about Israel's security, especially in light of the most recent developments with Bahrain and the UAE, and probably have some more time at the end, perhaps, to hear about Asaf's plans and Israelis' plans for how to celebrate Yom Kippur during this difficult lockdown period. So over to you, Asaf.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you guys again for joining. I guess I didn't push you off last week. So if you're with us, we're starting today. Hope everybody used the bathrooms and everything, because I'm not sure how many stops we'll have today. Just to start sharing my screen, we decided to treat you guys to the fancy hotel in Jerusalem, the King David. Okay, I hope you enjoyed breakfast, the Israeli breakfast, tried the shakshuka, and we're out on our way. Can everybody see the screen, by the way?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So when we look at Israel in its region, okay, we need to understand the location, the topography, which all affect later on human activities. That's important. Everywhere we need to understand how the area is built, how the land is built, because this affects human activity and decisions and wars and so on much later. So that's what I'll try to do, at least at the first part of our tour. Give an overview of Israel as a country and some of the important dates and how we got to certain places. And of course, we'll visit the different borders, and you'll have an opportunity also to ask questions, and we'll try and give some themes about each one. The problem with a tour like this, an hour and a half sounds a lot, but as I was going through the material, I realized that, an hour and a half is not enough for just Jerusalem. let alone the West Bank, and then Gaza and the northern border. So I try to condense and kind of give a larger view of things. And of course, we'll leave place for questions to try and make it more specific, and so on. So again, I like also using this map in my guiding, a very famous map from the 16th century. I'm sure you've seen it before. And it shows Israel, Jerusalem in this case, in the center of the three continents. By the way, they know the world doesn't look like this at the time. They have the New World here down on the left. They discovered America. Yet this is a very religious view, very common view for Christians, for Jews, and for Muslim that have these ideas of Jerusalem and the land of Israel in the center. And of course, physically today, Israel is connecting between different continents. And this affects, we saw the culture. Now we're going to talk about the different borders and other effects that come with this. So here we are looking at Jerusalem at the map of Israel. I marked on it also the green line, the different borders. You can see over here the Gaza Strip, the southern borders of Israel, and the north. And I'll move 1 second to a new to my second presentation. Yeah. So can you see this now? 1 second. Okay, yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. Okay. Again, another question is, where do we start? Many historians go over this case. Do we start in 1882 with the early Zionists? Do we start in 1700? Do we start in the 1917 World War I? Lots of different dates to throw out there. I decided to take the last partition proposal by the UN 1947. But even when we look at this map over here, and you can see the different map, the different colors, it's hard to understand it when we just look at the map. It's kind of flat. So I like also using this map, which kind of gives us the idea that the way Israel is built. Of course, you can see the same green line we've seen on the map before, and now it kind of gets another shape when we talk about probably the most neutral name for this area, the central ridge of mountains in the center of Israel, also known as Judea, Yehuda, and Samaria. In Jewish history, the Bible talks about the land of the Jews. Judea, Yehudi came from Yehuda, and the kingdom of Israel. If we go all the way back to the First Temple period, we have across from us the Jordan, and between the two, we have the Jordan Valley, which is part of the Rift, the Syrian-African Rift, the Dead Sea over here, the lowest place on earth. If we move north in this map, we can see the Golan Heights, huge plateau overlooking, again, the rift over here and the mountains of the Galilee and Mount Hermon. And down here, you can see the coastal plain where a majority of Israelis are located today. Tel Aviv is over here where my cursor is. And Gaza is all the way down here. And this is missing the entire Negev. Okay, but I do think this is a great map because it gives us, again, an idea of how this land is built, specifically talking about Jerusalem. You can see there's this enclave going in. So basically the last offer of a partition, there were several before, is by the UN voted. I won't go into the whole story. I'm trying to make this brief. But basically, this is the suggestion they come up with. We have, based on population, on majority of population, there were still Jews living in these orange areas. This is the area of Gush Etzion. At the time, 1940s, there's Jews there. We have Arabs living in Jaffa. We have Arabs living in the north of Israel. But basically, based on majority of population, they offer to part the land this way. The Negev, mostly empty, but it's a desert, not a great place at the time. We have the coastal plain. Now, you know, these are mountains. So strategic wise, not the best offer for Jews. And Jerusalem, you can see over here, is actually supposed to be an international controlled by the UN. So for a Jewish state Jews have been dreaming of a country for 2,000 years, to have a country without Jerusalem, with not great security, this is the offer. What did the Jews take? Or what's their response to this? They say, yes, it's better than the previous offer. It's actually better than nothing. So they'll take it. Here, let's see a short clip also. Can you hear?
No, Asaf, the volume's not working.
No. Okay, 1 second. 1 second then. Okay, I'll go. Basically, it's the end of the vote over partition. I'm sure many of you heard
began to
it.
celebrate the United Nations decision. If they hadn't got all they wanted, they had at least gained the verdict for the setting up of a new Jewish state, and their rejoicing was obviously a spontaneous affair. Such was the immediate Jewish reaction in Jerusalem, and it was the same in Tel Aviv and elsewhere. The Arab reaction was to follow. 2 days later, this was the typical scene. Arabs advancing on the center of Jerusalem at the beginning of a 3-day strike and an orgy of wrecking, looting, and bloodshed. Isolated police were more or less powerless to deal with the riot, which, beginning as a demonstration, quickly led to the burning of Jewish shops and the general destruction of Jewish property.
Okay, so were you able to hear now? Yes, okay, thank you. So if I need to sum this up, the Jewish-Israeli response in Israel, you see in the video, they go out in the Horaz in Tel Aviv.
No, I can't have it.
What's that?
I have it here. I'm listening to you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. So basically in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the Israelis go out in a hora. Ben Gurion himself writes in his diaries that he's not celebrating. He's understanding there's a war that's about to break out. At the time, you can see this picture over here, Jews are coming. We have hundreds and thousands of Jewish refugees, whether it's in Europe, out of the camps, or from Arab Muslim countries that expelled the Jews around these years. So more and more Jews are coming to the land of Israel. The Arab response, and at this time, it's not so divided to Palestinian Arabs, the Arab world, they don't accept this. Why? They think they can get a better offer, basically. That's they think they can gain more by war. There's attacks, riots, and we consider this as the beginning of the War of 1948, which Israelis refer to the War of Independence. Other effects or parts of this war, this is a picture of Palestinian refugees. Okay, about half of the Palestinian population within what becomes later on Israel leaves their homes, whether it's because of the war, rumors, they were scared, some of them were sent away by Israeli army, some of them were convinced by their own leadership to leave. The result is about 750,000 Palestinian refugees who leave. Until today, they pass down the refugee to the next generation. So there's already today a 4th generation of Palestinian refugees living in refugee camps supported by the UN. The count today is about 5 million. Okay, that's an important fact to take in. And you can see over here in this map, places that they moved to, from Jaffa, Ramle, to the West Bank, which becomes Jordan, down to the Gaza Strip. Okay, we'll meet with this also later, into the different neighboring countries. This is the Palestinian movement. Another second, or maybe before that, I'll say this is has anyone ever seen this? This image, it's his name is Khandaleh. Khandaleh is the Palestinian image of a refugee. You can see he's walking around barefoot. His clothes are torn. You always see him from behind. And it's a graffiti, stickers, in many places, the Palestinian symbol of a refugee, a boy who left his home, very famous amongst the Palestinians. His name is Khandale, a young boy. And this becomes part of the ethos of the Palestinian society, the Arab society that lived in Israel. And the tragedy that happened in 1948, the catastrophe, also known as the Nakba. Okay, so that's something, a term we'll be meeting again. The second stage of the war in 1948 is May. As the British leave, we have the invasion of 6 Arab armies. 6 Arab armies, you can see from different directions, enter into the state of Israel. Ben-Gurion declared it on May 14th. It was Friday afternoon, just before Shabbat. He didn't want to declare a Jewish state on Shabbat. The British left that night. And the next morning, there's the invasion of the armies who wouldn't invade into the British mandate. And the war goes on until 1949. This is a graph lots of Israeli tour guides like to use. Kind of gives the stages of the war. From 1947, the Arabs are attacking the roads. Jews lost a lot of different Palmach units and Haganah. And the peak of this, the high point and the change also is in April 1948 and May, when Ben-Gurion declares the state of Israel, and slowly each step Israel gains, and eventually we end the war on a different level. What I like to do with this is get the Palestinian view, which is the exact opposite. Starting with succeeding and attacks that they succeed, but eventually the declaration of the state of Israel is the lowest part in the Palestinian history view, and towards the end of the war they basically fade out and lose, and we have different views. The result of this war comes in 1949 with different agreements. You can see this is specifically Jerusalem, which is divided with this what we call the Green Line. Basically, this is a famous general, Israeli general. You can recognize him, I'm sure, by the patch on his eye. His name is Moshe Dayan. Later on, he's a minister of defense and politician. And at the time, he's sitting with Abdallah Attal, this guy over here, the Jordanian commander. And they're over the maps, marking everybody where their territory would be. By the way, the map that they use is a terrible scale, 1 to 200,000. 1 centimeter on the map is 2 kilometers in reality. It's important to say because they mark it with a pencil. You can see in their hand, a pencil which itself was a few millimeters thick. So you can imagine how the line of the pencil itself is tens of meters in reality. And it's a temporary map the way they see it, because either the war will resume or we'll get to a different solution. This is the green line. This is the lines we refer to until, some people would say, this day. So this map didn't only hold for 19 years. Every time the UN needed, there was a question between the sides, they actually went to the original map signed by these 2 generals. A terrible scale. The border goes through houses. It leaves the bathrooms in one part. Lots of areas up to discussion. How thick is the line? What's happening on the other side of the line? All of these things weren't necessarily taken into account. But this is how what we call the green line comes to be. And the map of Israel post 1948 or 49 is actually this. We have, again, it's actually bigger than the UN original proposal. You can see they actually opened up what we call the corridor to Jerusalem, the Posdo to Jerusalem. This green area becomes annexed by Jordan. That's what we call the West Bank. So those mountains of Judea and Samaria now receive the name the West Bank. Later on, they will become the Palestinian territories or the occupied territories or just the territories. Okay, but it's all the names of the same piece of land. We have over here the Gaza Strip, originally then taken by the Egyptians, but was not annexed. Okay, no citizenship over here in the Gaza. And over here, you can see Syria sitting almost on the line of the water of the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, the main source of sweet water, of fresh water in Israel. So this is the map of Israel. And again, I want to remind you, these are the high mountains of Israel, controlling down the area where a majority of Israelis are living. So how does this look in reality? This is, again, from Jerusalem specifically. That's the pictures I had, but this is a neighborhood in Jerusalem that has walls going through it, protecting from Jordanian snipers on the other side. This is another street divided between Jordan and Israel. You can see the soldiers exchanging cigarettes on both sides of the border. 19 years is a long time. Sometimes more tension, sometimes less. Center of Yerushalayim also, just by the municipality building. Walls protecting from snipers, signs saying border ahead of you. A nice story, or a cute story, from 1956, made it to Life magazine, about a hospital, the St. Louis. These are the windows of the hospital that are facing the no man's land. And one of the nuns noticed that one of the patients isn't eating or drinking, not talking for a few days. It turns out that she dropped her false teeth. She coughed and sneezed into tissue and threw it out of the window, with it her false teeth. So this is an international scene, because the nuns turned to the head of the convent, who turns to the Israeli army, who turned to the UN, who turned to the Jordanians to get this search party down to the no man's land. And no worries, the teeth were found. Okay, so she got her teeth back. You can see the UN guy, the Israeli officer. But these are some of the stories along the border with Jordan. It wasn't the most extreme border Israel had. That's what we call the green line. I'm really skipping forward here to 1967. To understand June of 67, the Six-Day War, we need to understand the days leading up to it. This, I would say, is a typical picture of high school students digging trenches in Tel Aviv. Israel at the time is not a superpower. It's not what Israel is today. It's a small country. The Arab countries, I'm talking about Nasser and the United Arab Community, Syria, Egypt, are calling to annihilate Israel. And 19 years Israel has existed. Nobody knows if it will continue more. People still remember the Holocaust in the background. These are the thoughts leading up to June of 1967. The Arab countries, Egypt, are closing on Israel, closing the Straits of Suez for Israeli ships. And they're expecting hundreds and thousands of casualties in Israel. Just to give you numbers, in 1948, Israel lost 6,000 soldiers, Israelis, Jews. That was 1% of the population. 1% out of 600,000. They were expecting more casualties than that in 1967. And this kind of explains also the transformation, yeah. This explains the transformation of 1967, because it's not in a month, it's in 6 days. Some people would say even in 3 hours. The first operation of the war, Israel takes out the air bases of Egypt, continues on to Syria and Jordan, and within 6 days, Israel tripled its size. Israel triples its size, taking the entire Sinai Peninsula. This is strategic depth. It means the war is not opening in your front door. You have enough time to anticipate and prepare. Israel also gains the high mountains, whether it's the Golan Heights from Syria or the Central Ridge over here, the West Bank from Jordan. And by that, gaining the sense of security. Okay, for Israelis, this is the last war. The Arabs must understand that at this point, there really isn't, they have no chance. In 6 days, this is what Israel did, defeated 3 Arab armies, tripled its size, and gained all these places. Definitely the sign is that, or I'll say the most famous picture identified with the 6-Day War would probably be this. The paratrooper standing at the Western Wall. That's the highlight. The most famous words any Israeli and probably Jew living at the time remembers. 3 words of the paratrooper command, Har Habayit Be'adenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands. The holiest site for Jews. Jews can now walk there freely. You can unmute yourself if anybody would like. Take a look at this picture. What do you see in this? details. It doesn't need to be interpretation yet, just any details if anybody would like to share.
The brotherhood of the soldiers and their expression of awe.
Yeah, their expression on their face is definitely something that captures people. If anybody else would like, that's great. I'll continue. It's kind of hard to see everybody while I'm doing this, but really, if anybody wants to say something, you're welcome to. I look at them. These are young guys. These are the paratroopers. In this case, were actually reservists on their first duty. They're 21. They just got out of the army. 19 years. None of them have seen the Western Wall before. If they have, they haven't remembered it. It was only a story, a dream. Suddenly, they're standing there. These are not religious, ultra-religious, orthodox extremists. These are young Israeli secular soldiers. But this was the feeling in 1967 in Israel of the war that really ended everything. Some would even say some messianic ideas start over there. What are the responses to the Six-Day War? So, this is Rav Goren. We've seen him before blowing the shofar last week. This is a picture of him in Me'arat HaMachpelah, in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Jews are discovering the sites of the Bible, discovering the Jewish heritage sites. For the first time in 1900 years, Jews are able to walk freely in the land. So that's definitely one feeling. If I take this picture of Yossi ben Hanan, later on a general in the Israeli army, but he just jumped into the Suez Canal. And I think this image kind of says a lot about the young David that just knocked down Goliath. That would be the image that that Israelis and Jews, I think, around the world take from the Six-Day War at the time. The unbelievable has happened. Within 6 days, not only the threat was eliminated, Israel overgrew. Israel turned to be a superpower overnight. So this is kind of the response. How do the Arabs react to this? So let's say, first of all, for the first time, Israel has control of the West Bank, including many Palestinian Arabs that were there. The Gaza Strip. Israel suddenly gains under its control many more Arabs than were planned. They came with the land, I would say. So that's something we'll be dealing with soon. What are the Arab responses to what happened? The Khartoum Convention, basically no, no, no. The famous 3 no's. The Arab League. Okay, I'm throwing terms because we'll be meeting them also later today with current news. The Arab League, the Arab countries are meeting in Khartoum in Sudan and stating no peace with Israel, no recognition, no negotiation, no normalization. We're no acceptance of Israel in this part of the world. The Arab honor was hurt too. That's something Israel also failed to see. And the result was 6 years later. In Israel, this is seen, by the way, we're coming up to Yom Kippur. This is the Yom Kippur War. It breaks out and Israel is caught off guard. The Israelis are hearing again and again and again from intelligence, from people who are saying the Egyptians and the Syrians are going to attack, and they say they won't dare. They've done the same drill in 1971. They've done the same drill in 1972. They won't do it. They won't dare. Look how much they lost in 1967. The arrogance comes over here of the government and is shattered in 1973 with over 2,600 Israelis killed in a surprise war. Now, Israel did not lose on the Yom Kippur War, because if Israel would have lost, it wouldn't have existed. In fact, Israel, a few days later, changes the course of this war, crosses over into the other countries and ends this 20 miles from Damascus, 40 miles from Cairo. So Israel stopped, deciding not to go there. This did create a major change in both sides. This is the different fronts Israel had at the time: Syria in the north, Egypt in the south. Jordan actually stayed out of this war. Later on, they also give up on the West Bank. So Jordan has no official claim anymore to the West Bank since 1988. What are the responses to the Yom Kippur War? In Israel until today, every year in Yom Kippur, the newspapers come out with articles, new discoveries, the archives were opened, what happened, this battle, that battle. Yom Kippur is still a huge issue over here in Israel. And it kind of splits up the Israeli society. If the Six-Day War was seen as a huge chance, this shatters it. Huge dream is shattered. The left in Israel starts the movement in the 70s of Shalom Achshav, peace now. You know, apparently war, even when we win the war that nobody thought we would, it's not enough, right? So war apparently is not the solution. We need to find a different way to live in peace in the Middle East. Shalom Achshav, this is the left-wing movement in Israel. The right wing in Israel also understands that there's nothing really to do with the other side. This is what we will do. And this is the movement of settling mostly in Samaria now, expanding the settlements, not only in places where Jews lived before. By the way, looking at these people, this guy's Hanan Porat. Hanan Porat was a longtime leader of the right-wing religious party. He was one of the paratroopers in 1967 at the Western Wall. And he is also a member of Kfar Etzion, a kibbutz that was taken over by the Jordanians in 1948. The biggest trauma of the war, where 240 Jews were murdered by the Jordanians, just on the eve of the declaration of the State of Israel. This is also the first settlement, Kfar Etzion, to be resettled by Hanan Porat and his friends, the children of Kfar Etzion, who, in their view, came back home to where their parents left them, or where their parents, some of them were killed in 1948. So this is Hanan Porat. This is a famous picture from Sebastia. Again, the settlement movement of the right wing in Israel, who decides to do our own thing and settle the West Bank, not negotiate the land, because that's also not apparently not a solution. Other responses to this, I'll say in the Arab world, the Palestinians, also kind of hard to say at this point, but something incredible happens also. This allowed the Egyptians that caught Israel off guard. I say we didn't lose, but the Egyptians also got their honor back. And now they can come and negotiate. This changed also the leadership in Israel. In this picture, we see three famous leaders, but from this region, two people who really did something incredible. That is the first peace agreement between Israel and an Arab country. On the left, we have Anwar Sadat, the Egyptian president who actually paid with his life for this act, and Menachem Begin, the right-wing Israeli prime minister, head of the Irgun, former Irgun, who invited Sadat, and eventually they signed peace. I'd like to also pause at this point, also to take a look at this picture. Look at the faces of them. We'll compare this to other pictures of peace agreements. Tell me what you see in this. And also to open it up for a few minutes for questions so far, just so I don't run the whole time with this. So if anybody would like to comment so far, this is more or less trying to build a common language so we can continue on to more current events.
They're holding hands and smiling.
They're holding hands and smiling. It's a much warmer peace. I'd say a much warmer relationship between the leaders. I definitely agree with that. Anybody else? Any questions that we can take at this point?
Hi, quick question. Would you...
Who asked it? You muted yourself, I think, or...
if anybody's having trouble asking questions using your microphone, just go to the chat button and you
Yeah,
can
maybe
just type it right in.
I'll
And
look in the chat to see
Asaf
if
can
anybody.
read it right from the chat. So if you have a lot of feedback from your mic, use the chat button.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any questions yet. Okay, so I guess we'll continue on. If there's no questions at this point. Okay, I'm going back to this screen. Okay, so we have Jimmy Carter, Menachem Begin, and Sadat signing the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. Israel pulls out of the Sinai Peninsula. There were some Jewish settlements that were there. They were evacuated too. And eventually, 1981, 1982, the peace between Israel and Egypt is done, holding until today. Is it a warm peace? I don't know. There's different ways to define peace in the Middle East. The leaders get along. Do the people in Egypt love Israelis? I'm not sure. But this is an important moment because it's the first Arab country to break the nose, the taboo, the normalization with Israel. Another important event that comes up, and this takes us closer to the West Bank, is in 1987 breaks out the first Intifada. Intifada uprising is the, how would I say it? Okay, first of all, 1987, if you look at the time, this is 20 years after the Six-Day War. This is a new generation. This is a generation that you can tell them until tomorrow their life is better under Israel than it is under Jordan or under anything else. What they see, there's no checkpoints at the time, by the way. You could drive from Hebron or from Gaza to Tel Aviv. They actually did. In the 1980s, they built up many neighborhoods, work all over Israel. And the conditions are not the same. They still don't have any status. I'm saying Israel, until this day, has not yet decided what to do with the West Bank, with these areas. They have been settled, but this is still the big argument between the right and left in Israel about controlling the West Bank, and we'll discuss this too. Annexing it, giving it up, creating a Palestinian authority and state there. 1987, the first Intifada breaks out, and this actually this comes from the street. This catches the Israeli leadership by surprise. What's interesting is that this catches also the Palestinian leadership by surprise. At the time, the leaders, Yasser Arafat and the rest of the PLO, are actually located in Tunisia. They are not connected to the streets here. These are youngsters who are rioting, and Israel doesn't really know how to respond to this. Sometimes it's with power, too much power, and the situation escalates throughout these years. This is called the first Intifada. We didn't know there would be a second one, but this was the Intifada. And the result of this Intifada is also interesting, because within Israel, again, the left and the right have different responses to this. I think everybody realized that you can't hold other people under control. The Israeli left moves on from peace now to ending the occupation, right? The discussion is more about moral. Okay, we can't continue on with this situation. This is probably the language which is still used in a way until today. So this is one side of this. The right wing in Israel is talking about security. Okay, and both of these arguments, in my opinion at least, are valid. Controlling the Palestinian population, policing them, controlling a large amount of people without any horizon. On the other hand, this is definitely a security issue. And we'll see this in a few moments when we look down at the West Bank specifically. Another side of this, and you can see this this time the image of the two leaders. On the left, Yitzhak Rabin, former, Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, but before that he was the amongst the positions he filled was the chief of staff of the IDF in the 6-Day War. He was a general at the age of 24. He was the commander of the Harel Brigade in 1948. Really, he understands insecurity, and the leader of, at the time, the left-wing Avoda party. And he invites over the guy on the right, Yasser Arafat, the symbol of the Palestinian struggle. In the Israeli perspective, this is an archi-terrorist, a man who has the blood of many Jews and Israelis on his hand. And he invites him over from Tunisia, and they establish what is called the PA. Okay, the PLO is part of that. It's called the Palestinian Authority. And that is established. The agreements are in the 90s, 1993, called the Oslo Accords. And I know when I look at this picture, and again, if someone agrees or disagrees, you're welcome to unmute yourself. It doesn't look so warm like the Begin-Sadat handshake. To me, Yitzhak Rabin looks a bit reserved in this picture. People who are close to him, I've heard them speak, say he actually was. Yasser Arafat always stayed in uniform. He was always in uniform, including when he received his Nobel Peace Prize with a gun in his belt. He is the symbol of the Palestinian struggle. And the major topics, the Oslo Accords, were supposed to be building up mutual trust. What do the Palestinians want? How does this really work? So over here, you can see the area which we call the West Bank. At that point, they divided up, these are the accords, to areas A, B, and C. If you want an easy way to remember, so A is Arab-controlled area. In Hebrew, B is in the middle, Ba'emtza. So this is a civilian controlled by Palestinians, but security-wise by Israel. And area C, this is all within the West Bank. Okay, all these areas A, B, and C. Area C is fully controlled, security and civil controlled by Israel. So just to give you an example, Palestinian cities, Hebron, Ramallah, Bethlehem, Nablus, these are areas A. Okay, there's no Jews living there, all under Palestinian Authority control as part of the Oslo Accords in the 90s. Villages around them, some of them are areas A, some are area B, depends. And everywhere where Jews live, and the roads, the major roads, that's all area C under Israeli control. And of course, you can see the Gaza Strip over here. The major issues that were discussed in the Oslo Accords were the borders of these states, the status of Jerusalem, and specifically the Temple Mount or Haram HaSharif, the noble sanctuary, the Muslim third holy site, and the old city of Jerusalem itself, which, just to remind you, is in East Jerusalem in the term of the area controlled by Jordan pre-1967, and the status of the refugees. These are the main issues. The borders, definition of the states, will the Palestinians accept a Jewish state? What would a Palestinian state exactly be? The status of Jerusalem and the issue of the refugees. These are the main issues that were supposed to be discussed in the Oslo Accords. They left them to the end. They said, let's build mutual steps of trust and leave these issues to the end for the year 2000. I'd like to, yeah, anyway, the year 2000. The year 2000 came, and at this time, Yitzhak Rabin, by the way, I'm really making a long story short, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. Prime ministers passed by. Ehud Barak, the prime minister in 1999, 2000, former chief of staff of the IDF, a very incredible, I think, or brilliant guy. In Israeli public sphere, I think he is not seen as one of the greatest prime ministers Israel had. In the year and a half that he was in government, he did two major moves. We'll discuss one, pulling out of Lebanon, and this is the Camp David talks. You can see Yasser Arafat literally needed to be pushed into the room. This is the end of the Clinton time. and he wants to achieve an agreement. He basically puts on the table an agreement and take it or leave it. No Israeli prime minister has ever offered the Palestinians as much as was offered in this agreement. According to our understanding, 97% of the West Bank was offered as a Palestinian state. Okay, that means keeping some strategic spots, places where majority of Jews are living, and even half of the old city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. That's offered by Ehud Barak. Some people say he really meant it. Some people say this was just floating a balloon to see if they'll take it. And Yasser Arafat storms out of this meeting. He leaves it and he won't accept it. Clinton is furious. Dennis Ross writes about this. Why? The question is why? Why did Yasser Arafat move out? They're saying you'll never get any other or better offer. He couldn't give up on the Palestinian refugees, right? We need to understand what that means. The amount of refugees coming back to the Jewish state of Israel. Okay, so we can go into that too. And he wanted, and again, the status exactly of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, who will be, how do you say, not just, who will be officially holding it. And let's share now this screen. Okay, can you see the map now of Israel? No, not yet. Okay, yeah. So I actually chose a few places to focus on when we talk about the West Bank, just to give you an idea of how this actually looks down on the ground. So this is a Jewish settlement. Today about 2,000 families living here, called Efrat. I chose this street where my parents actually live. This is my parents' house. So this is where I grew up. And I've actually taken several groups over here to see a house of settlers in the West Bank. Some of them are nice and established, like this place, nice families. Many, people work all over in Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim. Some of them came here because it was affordable. A suburb of Jerusalem. This is 20-minute drive from Yerushalayim. Nice community life. Some people came here from ideology. Another settlement not far from us is called Tekoa. Here I wanted to give you a bit more of the rural look that some of these settlements could have. Just to get an idea, the numbers of Jews in the West Bank today are close to 500,000. Okay? There's about 500,000 Jews living in the West Bank in different sizes of territories. Another place I'd like to take you to see is the Ida refugee camp. I'm sure you've heard of refugee camps. The symbol of the key of return, okay? The symbol of the Palestinian refugees. This is a pretty visited refugee camp. I've been here a few times. You can see over here the UN, UNRWA, the specific UN committee that, or I don't know exactly what's the term, but they're in charge of Palestinian refugees, of work, aid, and relief. And they run the schools here and other things. So this is the Ida refugee camp, not the greatest neighborhood, okay? But you have next to almost every Palestinian city, one or two or more refugee camps. These are the descendants of the refugees from 1948, okay? They're still under the refugee status. Over here on the walls, they have different struggles, leaders. Over here, also different pictures. Another nicer neighborhood, a Christian neighborhood, also within Bethlehem, or specifically in Beit Jala. It's a more Christian neighborhood. Just I'm trying to show the mix and different people that live here. Down the street is a very nice house that I've been to a few times. I actually guide, and over the recent years, I guide a tour. We call it a dual narrative tour, where two guides guide this tour. One of them is me as a Jew or Israeli, Another one is a Palestinian Arab guide, and we co-guide the tour together. So we sit with the group and we take them to a Palestinian house, to a settler's house. We talk about different sides and different, I guess the dual narrative is also a bit of a misnomer. It's multi-narratives, right? There's many Jewish narratives, many Palestinian narratives. I think it's nice to see this also, real life, real people living in both of these places. The amount of Palestinians in the West Bank today is estimated in about 2.4 million Palestinians living within the West Bank. Okay. So going back to this screen, when Yasser Arafat pulls out of this meeting in 2000, it literally blows up with launching of the second Intifada, the second uprising, which is very different from the first one. The second Intifada has suicide bombers shooting, much more violent. About 1,000 Jews were killed over those years. I was at the end of high school at the time, so I remember it pretty clear. The feeling of getting on a bus in Jerusalem and not knowing if you'll get 160 almost suicide bombers blew themselves up. Half of them were in Jerusalem. The shuk that we visited last week had 15 terror attacks over those years. The second Intifada, I said, is very different from the first one because this is led by the Palestinian leadership, by Yasser Arafat's personal troops. At this point, he thought he can gain more, again, by a struggle like this than by negotiations. One of the reasons he pulled away. What is the result of this? So again, we have checkpoints, and again, the clashes between the different sides continue on. And for about 3 years, this is hell on earth. Hell on earth. I'll say the most.
Asaf, I think you're frozen.
We can't hear anything.
Yes, I think Asaf froze. So I just sent him a chat to make sure that he knows he's frozen. But it was going so smoothly before. I'm not sure exactly what transpired.
He will try to log again.
Okay.
Well, maybe we could use this as an opportunity for everyone to take a bus bathroom break.
Exactly.
Okay.
Hit some water.
Exactly.
Oh, there's a falafel stand across the street I see. Maybe we'll run over there.
Also, if anybody has any questions that they want Asaf to address upon his return back, just type it in, and we will make sure to bring it to Asaf's attention. I see that Shari wrote in a question, which is great. That's really bizarre because it was going so smoothly. Okay. Okay, I just spoke to Asaf. He was able to reestablish his connection. So I guess one of those things about the internet lines, nothing is perfect, especially when you're halfway around the world. So we'll be back momentarily.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, I apologize. Probably had a needed bathroom break. Let me just reopen this. No. Okay, I have the PowerPoint. Okay, I'm ready to continue. I have no idea what happened. Shall we go? Go ahead. Yes. Okay. So I need Ifat, I need to be able to share the screen. Okay. And computer sound. And okay. Okay, so back to the year 2000, the second Intifada, and I was talking about Black March. Did we get to this point together? So no, where did we stop?
Right there.
Right there. So over the years of the second Intifada, there's terror attacks all over Israel. This is directed by the Palestinian Authority, as it's seen by Israel. Very, very different from the first Intifada. And the peak of this is the events of March 2002, Black March, when 130 Israelis are killed. Probably the most famous attack is the Park Hotel in Netanya. This was on the last night of March. Family sitting down for the Passover meal, and a suicide bomber blew himself up dressed like a woman in the middle of the hotel. As I said, the month itself, 130 Israelis are killed. This really shakes the Israeli society to its core. A couple of months later, the 32 Aleph bus in Jerusalem blows up, not far from the Aida refugee camp. 3 guys with suicide belts on them spent the night in the Aida refugee camp that we just saw. The next morning, they start climbing up towards Jerusalem. At the time, there's no border, no fence. Many Palestinians would cross every day into Jerusalem to work. 2 of them saw police, army. They turned around. One of them made it. He got on the 32 Aleph bus, 7:30 in the morning, a bus which was used by many high school students, and he blew himself up a few minutes later in front of the school. Most of the casualties on the bus were kids from school. Ariel Sharon at this moment is the prime minister, and he came down to that scene. He was very shocked, and he basically gave two orders at the time. We need to stop this terror wave. One of these things was regaining control of the Palestinian territories, which means if until then areas A, B were controlled by Palestinian authority, now we take care of our own security. And this is probably the situation until today. Every night since 2003, defensive shield operation, Israeli armies are active in the West Bank, arresting people who are preparing, involved, or suspected in terror. So that's the change that happens. Basically, it puts the Oslo Accord back. And the idea was they tried to actually get rid of Yasser Arafat, to send him to a different place. The second order Ariel Sharon gives is to build a physical barrier known as the wall, but the truth is most of it is actually a fence. The wall is in the densely populated areas, but this wall or fence actually goes almost all around the West Bank. Again, there's different ways of looking at this wall, both in Israel and by the Palestinians. I can say that the Palestinians are not happy with this, as this disconnects them from their land, from society, blocks them in, whether they're in the West Bank or Israeli Arabs or Israeli Palestinians living in Israel, who are disconnected. Israelis, the right wing, we haven't decided to annex the West Bank or give it up, yet someone put down a border without any discussion. The left wing in Israel has also criticism over this. We haven't what are we doing with this wall? Are we giving up? Is this a border? I think that's the general question. And if you ask the people behind this, they actually say it works. Both of these things combined together, we didn't reach these numbers of terror attacks over the years. I would say in a way, this is more or less where the West Bank is today. From here, just to give us numbers in Judea and Samaria. Again, just to go back to this map showing the strategic importance of Judea and Samaria. So the right-wing argument would be of holding onto these areas. You can see the distances that are marked over here. 15 kilometers is the narrowest part between these mountains. You can see that anyone sitting over here, without the most sophisticated weapons, is able to take down Ben Gurion Airport. You don't actually need to hit an airplane in order to stop airplanes from flying in and out, putting Israel under a blockade. About 2.5 million Israelis living in the Tel Aviv greater metropolitan going to be under range of the most simple rockets you can think of, especially since what's happening with Gaza. So that's I'd say the right-wing security claim. The left wing is saying, look at these numbers. Are we actually interested in bringing 2.4 million Palestinians under our control? Are we interested in holding them? Is it moral to hold them under military control? Are we interested in annexing them and adding to the 2 million Muslim, non-Jewish citizens of Israel already, basically jeopardizing the demography, the Jewish future of the state? So these are, I'd say, the two sides arguing over what's happening with Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. I would say that I think that even if a left-wing movement today is elected in the government, the most left-wing in Israel, and that's the Israeli view, mainly based on the second intifada, are saying there's no one to speak to on the other side. If Ehud Barak offered 97%, there's no one to speak to on the other side. I was actually interested to hear, it was surprising to me that the Palestinians claimed there's no one to speak on the Israeli side. The Israelis have shifted to the right. If you look today, 2020, kids who are serving in the army today were born in 2000. They were born in the second intifada. Who are the Arab or Palestinians that they meet? There's a fence between them. Any interaction is actually less. You only see it from the news. The first time you meet a Palestinian is after the news is as a soldier. And that's kind of a situation that we're in today. And of course, the Palestinians don't really see Israelis unless it's settlers in the West Bank or soldiers in a checkpoint. So that's the case right now for Judea and Samaria. I'm going to skip ahead and move to the northern border of Israel, talking about the year 2000 with Ehud Barak. An event that took place is in May 2000 is Israel pulling out of Lebanon after 18 years. Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, the first war in Lebanon, and sat there holding the security zone for these 18 years until the year 2000 when they pulled out. Some people said this was also one of the things that encouraged Yasser Arafat in July of that year to say maybe if we hold a bit more, the Israelis will eventually give up. What has happened since? Basically, the Israeli logic behind this was we're pulling out of Lebanon, they have no claim. Hezbollah, the organization in Lebanon, Lebanon is a Christian, was created as a Christian city, a Christian country, but has since been taken over by Hezbollah, which is a Shiite organization. Some claim it's a, see the pictures, but some claim it's a God's party, by the way, the translation, led by this guy, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, who are seen as a proxy of Iran. And this is one of the, say, biggest topics, the biggest threats seen in Israel's security today. And that is not the Lebanese, we don't talk anymore today about the Syrian or Lebanese border. We talk about a northern front. And everybody understands that behind these closer countries, we have a larger enemy, which is Iran, which is the Shiite axis. Basically, starting with Iran, Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran within Lebanon. The Syrians, the leadership at least, a minority ruling a majority of Sunni Muslim, and this is a gap or a break between the communities that goes back 1400 years. This is the most toughest battle within the Muslim world between Shia and Sunnah. And Iran is seen as the biggest Shiite country that were persecuted for years by mainstream Islam. 80% of the Muslim world is Sunni. And they are now gaining power, in their point of view, maybe a nuclear power. And this is putting all the Sunni countries into fear. And in Israel, we actually recognize Iran as the biggest threat. What happens in the northern borders of Israel is based on Iran. And what happened in Syria since 2011, the falling apart of the government there, and they're being backed up by Iran. Okay, they're seen as the Alawites as some kind of Shiites. And for Iran, if I share, for example, this screen over here, one second. Okay, so this screen over here, you can see that Lebanon and Syria are basically the opening of Iran to come into this area, this region, and Israel is, say, more or less seeing this as the big threat. Kiryat Shmona is the most northern city in Israel. For years, they suffered from rocket attacks. The biggest second. Okay, so yeah, we can see here the Iranian Nasrallah from Lebanon and the Iranian president, and basically Nasrallah is Israel's enemy on the northern border. In 2006, 6 years after Israel pulled out of Lebanon, 3 Israeli soldiers were kidnapped on the border. And that was the launching of the second war in Lebanon. In Israel, this is seen as a failure. The leadership didn't really have goals, what's going on. They came back without those soldiers that were kidnapped. A lot of mistakes were done during the war, but it's actually been quiet since. Is it quiet because we were able to disarm Hezbollah? Probably not. But what happened since 2011, as I said, in Syria, they're occupied. right? Hezbollah is sending their people from Lebanon to aid the regime in Syria, seeing this as the Iranian big plan. So they're busy. For Israel, it's right now good, but they're actually also gaining experience in a whole different way of combating, which is also a big issue or problem we understand is coming in. Since then, the northern border has been relatively quiet. Over the years, with the civil war in Syria, we have been feeling it in Israel. Israel has decided not to take a stand with what's happening in Syria, but aid along the border of Israel with Syria, along the Golan Heights. And I actually took this video of one of the operations. I want to share this video with you, an Operation Good Neighbor that Israel has launched. You know, there is a goodwill behind this, but there's also the understanding that if we aid the people, if the border with Israel is considered to be a safe zone, and that's how it was. Over the years, a lot of refugees were located along the border with Israel. And if you aid these people, they might not give room for terrorists to be amongst them. So that was also part of the thought behind this. So the northern border is relatively quiet. I wanted to show you a few of the things that are that we'll take a look in the north of Israel. So Kiryat Shmona is the most northern city in Israel. About 23,000 people living there, plus the 400 students at the Tel Chai College. You can see a lot of this area is very green, very full of agriculture, and it wasn't always like this. This area used to be swamps, one big swamp in this valley, the Rift. Over here, the Chula used to be a huge swamp, and in the 1950s, JNF, and Israel's biggest project, was to dry up the swamp. It took years to realize the damage that also happened to the ecological system, and one area was flooded, and that's called the Chula Lake. And there's actually a few clips we wanted to share over here, which can give us an idea of first of all, of life, living life under these conditions. You know, it's a pretty big threat that we just pointed out. Yet people are still living their lives there. Sorry. Come on. Lance, would you like to say something about this project?
Sure. While Asaf gets the video going, as he was saying before, Israel's north is a difficult place to live. We've made it a priority for people living in the periphery to do what we can to enhance and to enrich their lives. Vital for Israel. It's not screening Asaf. It's vital for people living in the periphery to have a good quality of life. We really do believe in investing in great places that are doing fantastic work for Israel. So one of the things that we're doing this high holiday season is we're investing in Tel Chai College. They have a research and development center called Migal, and Migal is making important headway into the discovery of a vaccine for COVID. They've had some breakthroughs with respect to a virus that infects chickens. So all they have to do is change the DNA and RNA to make it similar to humans, and we potentially could have a vaccine. So I don't know, Asaf, we can show a short video about Migal.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So we can skip that. That in short is what it's about. Then the second piece is there's Prime Minister Harper. In honor of Prime Minister Harper, who was a stalwart supporter of Israel, we were able to build a visitor and education center in northern Israel because we want to make this part of the country heavily trafficked with tourists. It drives the economy and it is incredibly beautiful. And I want you to know that right now about 500,000 visitors prior to COVID come to the Chola Valley. So we built a magnificent visitor center, and in the hopes that we're going to drive 1 million visitors to come to the north on an annual basis, and God willing, the crisis will end and we'll be able to visit Israel and see this fantastic facility.
מרכז המבקרים שאנו חונכים היום בהשקעה של 130 מיליון שקלים מהווה שדרוג משמעותי לפארק הצפרות המרשים שקק"ל הקימה כאן. בהגמון ירחיבו המבקרים את ידיעותיהם בצפרות, קיימות, אקולוגיה, טבע, מורשת וציונות. באולם הקולנוע יוקרנו סרטים על ההגמון, וממפלס הגג ניתן יהיה לצפות בפעילות השוקקת בו.
Agmon Hahula is an amazing accomplishment of so many that have been done by KKL, the Jewish National Fund. It is both a project of reclamation and migration. And of course, here in Israel, we have a similar story, a human story, not just a bird story, but a human story of reclamation and migration.
The inauguration of the Harper Visitor Center is evidence of JNF varied long-term activity in the Chola Valley and of its vision of Lake Agmon as a trigger for accelerating the development of the Upper Galilee.
אגמון החולה הוא יעד חובה לא רק לבעלי הכנף, אלא גם במפת התיירות הישראלית. המרכז החדש יקפיץ את מניין המבקרים בו וגם את כלכלת האזור.
It is really a magnificent honor for me to have the Stephen J. Harper Hula Valley Bird Sanctuary Visitor and Education Center named after me here as a great link between our two countries.
Prime Minister Harper, there is nothing that I or anyone else present can say to express our gratitude for what you have done and continue to do to strengthen relations between Canada and Israel. From the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of everyone here present, I say to you in the simplest and most sincere manner, Toda Rabah. Thank you.
You know, part of this actually has to do with the peripheral areas in general. We're going to skip now over down south to the Negev. and Ben Gurion's famous quote, the Negev basically sets the ultimate test to Israel. And in the 1950s, when there was an influx of immigration, they settled them in development towns, starting as these ma'abarot, as these transition camps, tents, a lot of immigrations, many of them from North Africa, Muslim countries, refugees, people who come without much, were basically spread around the different corners of the country, and not necessarily wanting it, but they established these beautiful communities. One of them that we're going to focus, so Kiryat Shmona is one example, but we're going to focus now on Sderot, because Sderot has more challenges than just that, as we're talking about the Gaza Strip, which is just on the western southern coast of Israel. The Gaza Strip, we're talking about 40 kilometers long and about 8 to 11 kilometers wide. One of the most densely populated area in the world. And Sderot is, the people there found themselves not willingly neighboring to that. So yeah, a bit about the Gaza Strip. Let's first of all see where we are located. So, okay. So we're moving from the north and all the way down to the southern part of Israel, and we'll give a few words now on Gaza to understand what's going on there and how did Gaza become what it is, and then we'll be visiting Sderot, which is neighboring to Gaza, with different challenges from being in the geographic and social peripheral areas of Israel, but also facing the security challenges. So it's double trouble, I would say. Okay. Okay, so back to Gaza. Until 2005, and I would say this is also maybe part of the result of the second Intifada, when Israelis realized that there's no one to speak to on the other side. The decision that came in the government, then Ariel Sharon, was pulling out of Gaza. You can see over here a picture of one of the Jewish settlements in the Gaza Strip. There were about 8,000 Jews living within the Gaza Strip. Many of them based on agriculture and education. And in 2004, 2005, the government decided on the disengagement from Gaza. A huge controversy within Israel, pulling out Jews from their homes in Gaza. By the way, JNF relocated many of the trees that they had there to other places in the country. This was a huge controversy within Israel. Again, based on the moral stand of Jews, removing Jews from their homes, or controlling a larger population for a small amount, and what are the costs that are being put into this, and the argument of security. Some people said it's easier to guard Gaza from outside, while the people who were living there, and in general, the right wing in Israel was saying being inside is what allows us to have more control. The price we were paying then is smaller, but that was the argument. And since then, some of the steps that took place. So a few details. The Gaza Strip itself is 40 kilometers on about 8 to 11 wide, and it's populated with over 2 million, probably now 2.2 million Palestinians, many of them living in refugee camps. About 80% of the people of Gaza are refugees. They're based on UNRWA. They're getting their aid from the UN, living in harsher conditions than regular. And another interesting fact is that 50% of them are under 25. So in the last 25 years, Gaza has doubled itself. Okay, that's an important fact to take in. And here, just a picture from the city of Gaza and the beach of Gaza. And in 2005, Israel pulled out. Soon after, there were elections where Hamas gained 50% of the seats in the parliament. It wasn't really given over to them by the PLO, so they just took over. In 2007, in a military coup, basically literally throwing people off of roofs and getting rid of any PA officials, Hamas took over. A terror organization, which is sworn to fight Israel, is now in charge of civilian issues also. And the situation has escalated. From Gaza, instead of having attacks within the strip, it started coming out when Sderot became the symbol of rockets coming out of Gaza, the most simple weapons, no aim, but that's why it's also cruel, because there's no difference between an open field to a hospital or a school or kindergarten. And Israel launched so far 3 operations against Gaza, 2009, 2012, without actual boots on the ground, in 2014. 2009, 2014, there were soldiers, Israeli soldiers in Gaza. The cost of that is huge. The life of the soldiers and the cost to society. And the question is, are we going to take over Gaza? Is there any reason to do this again? These are discussions that are going on in Israel. And here are Hamas friends. And we actually had 2 interviews that we're about to put on. One of them is with Alon Davidi, the mayor of Sderot, that Lance
that live in Israel, and we know that we cannot make a war every day, not every 2 days, not every 1 month. I really hope that Sderot will be a place that the Arabs that live in Gaza will invent. We will invent there. I dream, and all the mayor of the villages, the areas around Gaza, we hope that we can make a factory and hospital and university on the border, and it will be a place that help to them to live and help to us to develop. But for my experiment of 20 years, I think that the problem is a very big problem, because it's not about economic, it's not about border, it's not about electricity, it's not about ground. It's about belief of that. And I hope that maybe the time will change. So you can see we have something like 20, and you can see the number of the rocket. The number, it's always going down, going up, going down, going up. And each time, when it's going up, Israel go to Gaza and make some operation. The last one was Protected 8. We have Castland, and we have a lot of few operations that the army done in Gaza. But you can see what's happened in the last few years from 2040 to 2070. Something like that. You see the number is going down, and actually it was like very, very quiet time. And this is the year that you can see the number that jumping in Sderot. Dorel, you can continue. But look what's happened when we talk about the trauma. Even though that the number of the rocket going down, even though that the Sderot, it's become to be a popular city, and many people come to live in Sderot. And you know what? It's because the mayor. No, I'm kidding. It's because that we give a very, very good service to the people, and we really invest in the people. We work very hard to make the life the life of the resident that live in Sderot, that will be very good. But the number of the people that suffer from the post-trauma, you can see the details, it's jumping. It's not jump like to 100 to 200. You can see the number from 136 to 654. From 96 to almost 400. And you can see all the number on the total. You can see the total in 2008, it was 232. Now it's almost 500% jumping. So why? Why it's happened? It's simple. It's because the trauma. It's because that when you take a person.
Okay, thank you.
People that live in Israel.
Okay, another speaker, which is I think one of JNF favorite speaker is Miri Eisin. Let's hear also what she has to say.
The things that are happening in the Gaza Strip are very similar to the rest of the greater Middle East. They're not like Israel. And a lot of things, it's very challenging for me as an Israeli, as a colonel, as somebody who has served for most of my life, to compare Israel to anywhere in the Middle East, let alone the Gaza Strip. So let's talk for a moment about what is the Gaza Strip 2020 during the pandemic. So 2.2 million people, but there's a statistic there, a demographic there that is completely different from what we all understand. Because in the 2.2 million people, half of them are under the age of 25. Half of them were born after 1995. Two distinct different aspects. I mean, it's the 2.2 million, very condensed, half the population under the age of 25, and 80% of that population, both the under 25s and others, are what we call refugees. The third aspect, and everybody needs to take a deep breath. You're all going to hate me right now. Is everybody taking their deep breath? Do you all hate me right now? You know, for the people who live there, nobody has ever, I didn't even know how to say this it's my cynicism comes through because I have a lot of cynicism. I'm very Israeli. And when I do that with my, American accent from my parents who moved here 50 years ago, and so cynicism needs to come through. These people have never been citizens of a country ever, okay? Ever. The West Bankers were citizens of Jordan for a while. Right now, they're under the Palestinian Authority with all the challenges that there is. The Gaza Strip was under Egyptian military rule. It was under Israeli military rule. It has been for the last 27 years, 27 years under the initially Palestinian Authority, over the last 13 years under the Hamas, but it's not an independent state. And I know you don't think of it in the same way, but who gives the healthcare? Who does the different challenges of how that all goes? These are challenges there that are different from other places around the world. So already you're seeing several different aspects that I talked about here. And last and not least at all is that the Hamas the Gaza Strip for the last 13 years has been ruled by Hamas. Not that before they thought that Herzl and Zionism was a good idea, but under Hamas, they are openly, certainly within this time period, calling for the destruction of the state. Two distinct different aspects. I mean, it's the 2.2 million, very condensed, half the population under the age of 25, and 80% of that population, both the under 25s and others, are what we call refugees. The third aspect, and everybody needs to take a deep breath. You're all going to hate me right now. Is everybody taking their deep breath? Do you all hate me right now? For the people who live there, nobody has ever, I didn't even know how to say this it's my cynicism comes through because I have a lot of cynicism. I'm very Israeli. And when I do that with my, American accent from my parents who moved here 50 years ago, and so cynicism needs to come through. These people have never been citizens of a country ever, okay? Ever. The West Bankers were citizens of Jordan for a while. Right
Asaf,
now, they're under the Palestinian Authority with all the challenges that there is.
We heard this.
The Gaza Strip was under Egyptian military rule. It was under Israeli military rule.
Oh, it's repeating?
Just a small glitch. It's going to go on to her next point. It's a small glitch.
Okay.
It has been for the last 27 years under the initially Palestinian Authority, over the last 13 years under the Hamas, but it's not an independent state. And I know you don't think of it in the same way, but who gives the healthcare? Who does the different challenges of how that all goes? These are challenges there that are different from other places around the world. So already you're seeing several different aspects that I talked about here. And last and not least at all is that the Hamas the Gaza Strip for the last 13 years has been ruled by Hamas. Not that before they thought that Herzl and Zionism was a good idea, but under Hamas, they are openly, certainly within this time period, calling for the destruction of the state on. We still do not have any kind of real, concrete, take the last deep breath today, positive policy that will resolve the issue called the Gaza Strip. And I put that on the table right now because every time I get the chance to come to visit Alon, to visit Sderot, to visit the communities around Sderot, to see what it takes to be living next to that, and I don't live next to it, and I'm very aware of that, to understand that we need people who have conviction, who have resilience, who understand that at the end, if we don't live in Sderot, and we say we're going to leave there because it's so near the Gaza Strip is just going to move. It's not like it's going to stay static there. So that the challenge right now is to have a kind of policy that both contains it. It's very challenging to really completely isolate it, but there is no happily ever after easy way to resolve it. Not in 2020. There hasn't been in the last 20 years. And it's really in its own way a Greek tragedy. And I say that very sadly. So that's the remarks that I'm going to make for right now. IDF is absolutely doing the functions of the IDF. I want to tell JNF Canada, we're strong, we're on our borders. We haven't upped and left because of the pandemic. I spent the day yesterday up north on the northern Syrian and Lebanese borders. I haven't yet gone since coronavirus down to the southern Gazan border, but the active units, what the IDF did to be able to continue to do their regular on the spot activities is the IDF isolated themselves. Alon said that he has a son in Golani. I have 2 kids right now who are both serving. And basically what the military has done is they've shut them off from us so that they're coronavirus free and they're doing their day-to-day activities. They're on the borders.
Yeah.
One of the things that are happening.
Okay, so one second. Okay, let me stop this for a second. Okay, so hearing about what's happening in Gaza, we now want to focus on Sderot and take a quick just tour. I had a few places prepared, but I think we'll go into only to try and understand what it means to live in these conditions as children, and then we'll see a few more projects, interesting things that are happening in Sderot. So, you know, I think my if we come close to Sderot, I think my favorite place to visit is the Caterpillar Park, which you can see is a playground. But whenever I bring people over here and you look from close, what looks like a simple, innocent caterpillar is actually a bomb shelter. That is, how do we keep, and that's the question, how do we keep living and giving our children the sense of normality, of living while this is happening. We have different projects. This is the part of the resilience.
אני רוצה פשוט לשחרר את הפחד ולא לפחד מצבע אדום ולהיות להיות משוחרר ככה, להצליח להירדם. אני רוצה להיות ככה, אבל זה לא מצליח לי. אז שלחו את הטיל, כיפת ברזל פוצצה את זה, אז שמעו את זה ממש חזק, וכזה בום, ואז בום. היה שריקה מאוד חזקה, אז זה היה מבהיל, זה עושה לי צמרמורת. בגלל שהיה פול צבע אדומים, כשאני נרדם, אז אני שומע את צבע אדום, ואז כזה אני בלחץ, בתור חלום כזה.
אחרי שבת את הצלחת לישון בלילה?
לא, מכל הרעש הזה, ממש לא. הסתובבתי להקיא ולא נרדמתי, הייתי רע.
Time in mind, I know we've already gone over a bit, but I think there's, in my opinion, a few important projects to share in Sderot, keeping in mind both the security issue and being in the peripheral area. Lance, would you like to say something before this?
I'll say something afterward.
Afterwards, okay.
Bet Kakal actually helps us make our dreams come true, and we learn here how to be better people, not only just learning about what we want to do in the future life.
This project is going to bring hope to the children there, hope and safety to the children in Sderot. We didn't fully understand what it was all about until we came to this facility in Nof HaGalil to see what they've actually been able to accomplish.
As a former educator, I'm blown away by this. This is an incredible facility. The smiles, the conversations, the interactions, the young teachers, the enthusiasm. They are here because they want to be here. They're learning because they want to learn.
Bet Kakal made us believe that we can do anything we want. It's a place when you can study in a fun way.
People live in fear of the rockets in Sderot. This project is going to be a safe house, a place where they can come, feel safe, they can learn.
יחד איתכם נוכל להקים פה בית שיעניק כישורים לנוער שלנו, כישורים השייכים למאה ה-21.
They are investing in the future, investing in the children, and this has been very, very exciting for us to see and to be a part of.
So I know we're running short on time. I hope you can hear me all right. I just wanted to say that this is one of our most important projects. It's a national project. Canadians from coast to coast are involved in it. You saw the Lyons family from Winnipeg. And speaking of Winnipeg, I just wanted to make mention that, that we actually are so proud that we have a naming right for this building. The building is going to be named in honor of Bertie and Irvin Cohen of Winnipeg. And we're actually thrilled that on our tour right now is their son. And we're just delighted that the Cohen family's good name is going to be connected with this beautiful project. And Canadians from coast to coast are going to be part and parcel of this facility for the youth of Sderot. And you see the quality of life that they have and the challenges facing them. So we as their family in Canada can do one little thing to make the youth in Sderot have a better quality of life. And I really just want to say to everybody involved, thank you so much. It's a beautiful project and we're so proud.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess I'm kind of left with one last topic, which I'm going to do really quick. And that's the last screen that you saw. And that has to do with the agreements between Israel and Bahrain and the UAE. But before that, maybe if there's any questions, this is an opportunity, and then we'll close up with that. So if anybody would, or comments, it doesn't need to be a question. I saw someone asked before about October 1973. I would say definitely for the Arab world, that's something that that brought them to the realization, to Egypt, of bringing them closer to a peace agreement with Israel. The big topic that's being discussed today is normalization. The Palestinians are very much against anyone normalizing with Israel, but over the years, Egypt were the first ones, and then Jordan joined in. The question was who will be next, and that's something which is actually happening in recent, say, years, but in the last few weeks and months, it's what was under the table is becoming on top of the table, and that's the different agreements with Arab countries. And this goes back to Iran, seeing the Sunnis seeing Israel leading a spear head against Iran, against the Shiite regime that's opposing a big threat to the Sunni countries mainly. So that's kind of shifting, putting the Palestinian issue a bit on the side in that perspective, and allowing Israel to open relationship with the Arab countries who in the past would not do anything before the Palestinian issue was solved, and that is the refugees. You can unmute yourself and ask. It's it's hard for me to guess what you're thinking or asking. Let's open the chat and see.
Hi, Joel Ross here. I
Hi.
love what we've been doing and learning as much as we know, and we're redundant in some of the stuff that we're learning, but it's great to bring it forward and be at the top of our minds of current events and past events and history. I support the idea of Lance of continuing a program like this on an ongoing basis, given to it. We appreciate your time and all your real-time feelings and touring and your insight, Asaf. So I would really, really support and like to see us create a program, Lance, that's ongoing. I mean, 4 hours and we're moving a little past our time here. And there's just so much more to explore, which I enjoy with someone like yourself who's lived there your whole life, and to take us through these times and explore even more up in the Golan Heights and in Tel Aviv and Eilat and what's going on, what's happening in some of these areas. I'll plug my boy who I guess he was maybe about 16. He played for the Canadian-Israeli hockey team, and we were up in Metula at the Metula Center.
Oh, you got to see the different parts of the country.
Yeah, and these kids were playing hockey up there, and the kids were learning, and they would hear shells, like in the background. What a learning experience for them. It was a terrific opportunity for them. My boy and my daughter participated, in the touring of Israel and the kibbutz and things like that. Anyway, that being said, just one last thing. I know it's boring for everybody, but we're there, and the name on the back of the sweater, and this man comes down, and is Ira Gershowitz, who lives in Israel, is a friend of mine, and we went to Talmud Torah together and things like that. Moved there many, many years ago, and he says, is your dad Joel or is your uncle Steve? We're twin brothers. He's not participating in this event right now. He should be, and he said, yeah. He says, oh my God. He says, I was your age when, I knew your father, and it was just a fantastic experience. And since then, Ira and I are connected and we talk, and he's.
I always find it fascinating how people who come from one end of the world meet their their
Well,
best
he
friends.
was at
Or
Torah with me in grade school on Bathurst Street Associated, which I attended until my bar mitzvah, and we've now reconnected for many years to another friend of ours that we attended Talmud Torah, and I mean, and some other people, Doron, and some other people that I know that are living in Israel now, and the connections are fantastic, and just you know a lot, but to just reacquaint yourself with a lot of this and some of your experiences, Asaf, it just who lives there, and my sister who's participating in this, Wendy, we have cousins that live just outside of Jerusalem, and some family there, and I just love what we're doing. And Lance, who we just saw a couple of weeks at the JNF a couple of weeks ago at the golf thing that we ended up getting off the ground, which was fantastic, and things like that. But I just think that I'd love to see, Lance, a continuance of this program in some fashion or manner to continue. I think it's an introduction, and I certainly have enjoyed it. And I know my sister, we've talked about after the first session. I haven't talked to her about this one, but I think it's something that we should do as an ongoing program.
Joel, thanks for that feedback. We love it. I want to just say that Yifat, who's with us, she did a similar program for educators over the summertime to get our teachers ready for the school year, a little inspired and enriched. So we are thinking about doing this again. And as a matter of fact, one idea that came out, so we want to engage our non-Jewish friends. So we're thinking about doing a tour especially geared for non-Jewish friends of Israel. So more to come for October, November. So rest assured. Jacques asked a question about the animal assisted therapy program in Sderot. So I wanted to answer your question, Jacques, that yes, that center is built. It's a joint project between Australia, USA, and Canada. And it is part of the Resilience Center that Alon Davidi referenced in his comments. And the Resilience Center is actually going to be a physical building. It's going to be, multi-stories and quite large. That is not yet built. That's a project that's ongoing, and we are helping a bit with the fundraising on that. There's actually a very generous family from Winnipeg who stepped up. The Calgary community has made a commitment to that center in 2021, so we're going to raise some money. But for the Animal Assisted Therapy Center, the outdoor facility, yes, that's well on its way. It's part of the Resilience Center, and it's the first part that was completed, and it really was a nationwide effort. There are names on the plaques connected to it from Vancouver to Montreal. So it really is, JNF Canada truly is a team sport. Every city, every community has a role to play.
I'd like to maybe, maybe I'll sum up with the last screen I made, and we'll connect it hopefully to Yom Kippur too. Here, I'll just open over here. So this peace agreement has recently been signed. And this bird, this was in one of the Arab newspapers in the Emirates. This is a historical move also. And what I tend to, when I talk about narratives, the Palestinian narrative, I mentioned about Khandaleh, and the other side of this is Srulik. This is the, how to say, the image of the Israeli young Sabra. And it's two different narratives which are being told. This is a picture from Tel Aviv of graffiti, part of my graffiti tour. And I don't know if this is where it's going to or how it would be. And when I say that, I think if we talk about narratives and ideas, this is Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas. This picture is from 2014, and he's standing on the ruins of his house, and he's marking with his fingers the letter V of victory. And Westerners ask, what kind of a victory is this? He's standing on the ruins of his house, but he's still standing. In the Palestinian perspective, they've been beaten and evacuated from their home, and the whole world, even the Arab world, and that's what's happening now, is moving away from them. But they're still standing. They're still keeping the struggle. If I need to put this together, if in 50 years or 150 years from now, Israel is gone, and they're still standing. They stood against Israel no matter what Israel brought on them, and the West and America and so on. They won. They're the heroes of that story. And that's kind of what I see in this picture. The Israeli narrative is about a nation who's traveled for 2,000, the Jewish story. You know, we traveled for 2,000 years dreaming of one country, and eventually we came back with all the hardships that we went through. And from four corners of the world, literally, Jews came back and put up an incredible country. And if in 50 years or 150 years, we're still standing here and the Arab world is accepting us and we're accepted in where we are, so we won. And these two narratives are, you know, kind of clashing, one instead of the other. They can go together in a way. And the interesting change of the last few weeks, when these things are surfacing and coming up, is in a way also symbolizing a change. You know, it's not peace with the Palestinians yet, and we still have a long way to go for true peace. But these are steps that are changing things that we knew for so many years. You know, the fact that these, you know, maybe not because they love us, maybe it's because of Iran, but things are slowly changing. And I said I'll connect this to Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. The holiest moment is when the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, used to go into the Holy of Holies, the most inner room in the temple. And he didn't pray there. He would only put incense, smoke something very, you know, kind of spiritual, physical. You can see it, but you can't really touch it. And he would step out. And when he came out, that's the prayer he said. Until this day, every community, we recite the prayer of the Kohen Gadol. We remember what he did and we recite the prayer he said when he came out. And when he came out of the Holy of Holies, he would pray for peace. Peace in the world, and that everything should be as it should be. You know, that the rains will come at the right season and the fields will ripen and families and women will bear children, and just a normal world. That's our prayer and what we ask for. And I think specifically, or we could enhance this request and prayer this year for really just a normal world. You know, we suddenly realize also with the COVID and the fact that we're having this tour this way, you know, without the full bus and all the noises and everybody with their preferences and so on. We just, in my opinion, pray for a normal world, just a regular way to come, to wake up in the morning, get on an airplane if we want to, go travel, meet family, be with in my case, my grandparents, or with our grandchildren, and be able to share regular moments of life. So I think that's a prayer the Kohen Gadol would say this year if he was coming out of the Holy of Holies. Let's have the world go back to normal. And yeah, I'd like to wish everybody Shana Tova, Gmar Chatima Tova, and really wish and hope to see you in Israel, Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim.
If I can, Asaf.
Yeah, of course.
During the Yom Kippur services at the end of Nila, we sing the phrase L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. But we couldn't wait, so we embarked upon this tour with you. And I think on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for a wonderful 2 days of touring Israel. It's rich and difficult history, and it's hopeful present day state. So thank you so much for staying up late. Thank you for the preparation. Thank you for reminding us.
I apologize for the time that this took more. It's just so hard to condense.
No, I know. We look forward to seeing you in Israel. Lance, you will have to send everybody Asaf's contact information for their next trip. And until then, Debbie and I want to wish everybody a meaningful and reflective Yom Kippur.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, everyone. And thank you.
Toda Rabba. Thank you very much.
Shana Tova. Thank you very much.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. We'll all